We're going to be talking about the relationship between degrees and radians. We're going to be converting from degrees to radians and from radians back to degrees. Using the basic relationship pi radians equals to 180 degrees. Number 1. To convert degrees to radians, multiply degrees by pi radians divided by 180. So anytime we're given an angle in degrees and we want to convert it to radians, we will multiply by pi radians divided by 180. Number 2, to convert radians to degrees, we will multiply radians by 180 degrees divided by pi radians. So these will be the two steps that we will take. The first one, to convert from degrees to radians, we will multiply degrees by pi radians divided by 180 degrees. And number 2, to convert radians to degrees, we will multiply radians by 180 degrees divided by pi radians. So, with that being said, let's look at some examples of converting each angle in degrees to radians. So if we are going from degrees to radians, we will take the degree angle, 30 degrees, and we will multiply it by pi radians divided by 180 degrees. Okay, so think of 30 degrees is over 1. If you multiply straight across, you end up with 30 pi divided by 180 degrees. Now you still have your radians. Okay? Now we can reduce. We can reduce 30 and 180. 30 divides into 30 one time. 30 divides into 180 6 times. So we really end up with pi over 6. And that is radians. So to convert, we converted 30 degrees to radians. Our answer would be pi divided by 6. That's our answer. Let's look at 90 degrees. Converting degrees to radians, we will take 90 degrees and multiply it times pi radians divided by 180 degrees. 90 is over 1. So when you multiply straight across, you get 90 pi divided by 180 degrees, and that is in radians, 90 pi radians. Then we reduce 90 and 180. 90 will divide into 180, so 90 divides into 90 one time, 90 divides into 80 two times. So I end up with pi divided by 2 radians. So 90 degrees is the same thing as pi over 2. Now let's look at negative 135 degrees. So take negative 135 degrees over 1 times pi radians divided by 180. If you multiply straight across, you get negative 135 pi radians over 180. Now we want to find the largest number that will divide into 135 and 180. So we will use our calculator, and we can divide each of these by 45. So if I divide 135 divided by 45, I get 3. If I divide 180 by 45, I get 4. So when I reduce this, I get negative 3 pi over 4 radians. So negative 135 degrees is the same thing as negative 3 pi over 4 radians. So here we have converted from degrees to radians by multiplying the degrees by pi radians divided by 180. Next, let's convert each angle in radians to degrees. So this time we're in radians. You can tell when you're in radians by you having pi Pi tells you that if you have pi, you're not in degrees. So here we have the pi over 3 radians. So going back to our rules, to convert from radians to degrees, you will multiply by 180 divided by pi radians. Okay, so we're going to take pi over 3 radians, and you will multiply times 180 over pi radians. Okay, when you do, the radians cancel. Okay, so the radians cancel, the pi's cancel. So I end up with 180 divided by 3, and 180 degrees, that's degrees, divided by 3 gives me 60 degrees. So pi over 3 radians is the same thing as 60 degrees. Next, negative 5 pi over 3 radians. Let's convert that to degrees. So I have negative 5 pi radians divided by 3 times 180 pi radians. The pi radians cancel. Now I have negative 5 times 180. That gives me negative 900 divided by 3 degrees. Negative 900 divided by 3 gives me negative 300 degrees. So there's my answer there. So negative 5 pi divided by 3 radians is negative 300 degrees. Next, 1 radian. Let's convert it to degrees. I have 1 radian times 180 divided by pi radians. Okay, so here the radians cancel. I end up with 180 divided by pi. That's degrees. Now we would punch it in our calculator. 180 divided by the pi button. 180 divided by the pi button gives you 57.3 degrees. 57.3 degrees. And the last one, 2.3 radians. That's 2.3 radians times 180 divided by pi radians. Every time to convert from radians to degree, multiply it times 180 degrees divided by pi radians. So the radians cancel. You end up with 2.3 times 180. 2.3 times 180. So you have 2.3 times 180 divided by pi. And this is where you would use your calculator. You'd multiply 2.3 times 180 and divide it by the pi button, and you would get approximately 131.8 degrees. So again, punch in your calculator. 2.3 times 180, and then divide it by the pi button on your calculator. Find your pi button. And you end up with 131.78, but if you round it to the nearest tenths, it would be 0.8.